South China Sea, dispute in the South China Sea. Why is China being aggressive? Can't we all just talk peace? ASEAN, they just can't find a way. Almost like a Korean screenplay, they're fighting every day. Let's all talk it out. Where is the consensus? Where is the consultation? Restraint, respect, ASEAN Way. South China Sea, dispute in the South China Sea. Why is China being aggressive? Can't we all just talk peace? Alright, hey guys. Not one of my final moments, but I hope you enjoyed that little intro to the South China Sea Dispute SBQ answering part 1A set of podcasts. This is the third in the series of podcasts on how to answer question 1A. So I haven't really got time in class to go through that, but hopefully through the podcast plus the sample essays, you can see the structure and what is required in part 1A. Anyway, for part 1A is 10 marks. It's an easy 10 marks, but at the same time, you also don't want to spend too much time on it. So let's learn how to be efficient at it by hitting all the target points, what Cambridge is looking out for part 1A. So the same things over here, go and read the South China Sea conflict, look at the part 1A question, compare and contrast the evidence provided, source C and D on the nature of the South China Sea dispute. We've dealt with these kind of questions before on nature. Basically, we're looking at the characteristics of the conflict, looking at things like whether it's over sovereignty, security, economics, ideological, so on and so forth. So this is what this 1A is about. So go and look at sources C and D, annotate them on your own, and then try it out for yourself before you go on with this podcast. So right now you see the pause button on the YouTube interface. The pause button kind of looks like equal sign, but it's like vertical. You click it. Okay, you click it first. Yeah, I'm waiting. You click it. And you go and do the 1A first, and then come back later. Okay, click it. Okay, good. So yeah, welcome back. The objectives of 1A these are things that I've gone through before. You want to identify similarities and differences. You identify both similarities and differences, and then you get that's the only way you can hit the top band, which is L4, 9 to 10 marks. So looking at source inference, you identify them first. Then you use the source provenance and any associated contextual details to explain the similarities and differences. So point 2 is the more important part because it will get you the higher kind of evaluation marks. Using the provenance to explain why the sources are similar and why the sources differ. So there isn't really a great need to inject like content kind of contextual knowledge in here, but anything associated with the provenance you can bring in. The key driver of the evaluation for part 1A is using the provenance as much as you can. So more or less, they should give you at least one primary source. Last year for A-levels, they gave one primary and one secondary. But if they give you two primary sources, then all the more better. Even if it's a secondary source, you need to use as much detail as you can from the academic source, the date, things like that to do the evaluation. So number 3, keep in mind we are not testing for reliability, usefulness, or credibility in part 1A, that you save it for part 1B. LOMS wise, you can take a look at it yourself. Let's all aim for L4. I think it's quite achievable. So let's learn how to do it. The more important part is the structure. Again, going through the one on the left is giving a short introduction. you identify the similarities, you identify the differences, and then you go into the contextual understanding of both. The last two boxes over there, the blue and the pink one, that is where you use the provenance to explain the similarities and differences. It has come up during consults thus far. I would suggest that we all start with the similarities before we do with the differences. I think reason being that we want to get the broad trends of both sources first, and then we look for the nuances between the two sources. Seems argumentative flow wise, it seems a lot more coherent, a lot more logical, but I think this is a matter of style, and it doesn't really matter whether you conform to this or not, but I think it's good to try it out. The one on the right is it's slightly different. You go into the similarities, you go into the contextual understanding of the similarities, and then you repeat the process with the differences as well. Again, matters of style. I don't think I need to conform you guys to anything. You can choose which one you are more comfortable with. Now, today's podcast, looking at source 1A, looking at question 1A, I want to do something a bit different. Basically, I want to show you how to prepare to answer rather than the answer itself. The answer itself, you can go and check out the sample essay and then look through the structure as per normal. But today in the podcast, I want to show you how you can prepare for the answer. So on the left hand box, you can see the source itself. This is source C. And then on the right hand side, you have both my inference and my provenance examination. So firstly, when you look at the source for 1A, keep in mind the focus of the question. And the focus of the question here is nature. So anything to do with the nature of the conflict, I'm going to want to highlight them first when I do my annotation of the sources. So you can see the yellow highlights in the source itself. Those are things pertaining to do with the nature. So essentially claimed, something to do with territorial. Crestone Energy Exploration Company, that one has something to do with economics. Pursue territorial claims, obvious. Proven willingness to use force, so that's something to do with security. Opposes Filipino and ASEAN attempts to internationalize the issue, so that's something to do with multilateral diplomacy. So these are the kind of things that characterize the South China Sea conflict and the diplomatic process associated with the management of this conflict. So all those things I highlight. Then I go into my inference. So you see bullet 1 over here, issues to do with territorial sovereignty, security element to the conflict with Chinese aggression, and some mention of the economic dimension, although indirectly. So this is just a stating of a energy company, and I can allude to an economic dimension to this, but this source doesn't really state it out. This will be important later on when I look at the differences between the two sources. Then going into the provenance, Lieutenant Colonel Stanley E. Mayer, United States Army, United States War College. This source is an American one, thereby from the first bullet point there, it is not from one of the direct claimants of the dispute by an interested party. So the US sees itself as a Pacific power, so it has a vested interest in this. At the added dimension to this, or the added layer to this, is its geopolitical competition with China. So actually by that alone, you can sort of tell how the US foreign policy works and the lens that it chooses to adopt to view the South China Sea issue. The economic dimension is not as pronounced as the geopolitical one. So the source provenance gives an indication of the lens or the framework of American foreign policy in the Pacific. And 1996 itself is a contemporary source, meaning that it is written at that point in time. It is a military assessment. You see, it's from a US Army War College. So it's a military assessment of that point in time. And at that point in time, 1996, there has been points of escalation, which then brings in the security element to this conflict. 1996 is 1 year after a very prominent incident in the South China Sea, the Mischief Reef incident. And that is another example of Chinese aggression, which the US uses as its foreign policy lens in their view of this conflict. So that's kind of the standard thing you need to do, where you first annotate the source, and then you tease out the inferences, and then you look at the provenance to see why is the author making such claims. So that's just for source C alone. This is isolated within the source itself. Same thing, you go on to source D. Source D is a Philippine source, a cartoon published in the Philippines, New Star, which I assume is a newspaper, 999. And going by the cartoon here, look at the source itself. Look at the source package itself. The cartoon here is a bit small, but if you go into the cartoon itself, you can see that there are issues to do with territorial sovereignty. Same to source C. Security is here as well with Chinese aggression. But there is one of the big differences here is there's a more explicit mention of the economic dimension as well as multilateral efforts. The economic dimension you can see is mentioned is shown in panel 2, and the problematic and complicated nature of the multilateral efforts are shown in panel 3 and panel 4. So these are kind of the things that I want to pick out because they are going to help me in identifying differences with source C later on. A cartoon published in the Philippines, New Star, so that is the provenance, is from one of the direct claimants of the SCS territory. So this is in contrast to the US, which is more of an interested party rather than a direct claimant. And this is a possible indication of the frustration of the Philippines given ASEAN's lack of progress. You can see ASEAN is painted in a very condemnatory light over here. The newspaper medium, we go into the vehicle of expression itself, is a public source to express frustration. The nature of cartoon sources tends to be exaggerated, tends to be a satire, tends to be a caricature. So the intent then is to really criticize something, and in this case it seems like it's criticizing ASEAN. 999 contemporary source is also set within a period of high tension. This is escalating tensions. By this point in time, there are both Vietnamese and Philippine physical counteraction against Chinese aggression already. So although ASEAN efforts are still going on, but individual nations are also staking their claim in the South China Sea and and countries from ASEAN itself. So just a recap, you look at source C, the right hand column, and then you look at source D, the right hand column as well, and then you combine the two things to put it together. And then when you have a table map like this, you can then start to see what are the similar points and then what are the differences as well. And then after consolidating the similarities and consolidating the differences, you can also look at both provenances and understand why there are similarities and then also why there are differences. And your job at the provenance stage, the contextual understanding stage, is to explain why there are similarities and why there are differences. It's really as simple as that, using the provenance to explain why there are similarities and why there are differences. So for the sample or guide as to how you can do it for this SBQ, do check out the long the full essay that I've uploaded on Google Drive as well. And if you have any questions from there, just let me know. Basically, it's the same kind of format as I did for the other two part A, one on the formation of ASEAN and the other one on the Cambodian conflict. So you can take all three, put them side by side, see my structure, see the way to do things, and if you have any questions, let's clarify them during consults. So yeah, thanks guys, I'll see you all soon.